They said it couldn't be done, but they underestimated the power of an iron will and a steady heart. Watch as we bring you the most intense stories of perseverance and the final victory of the mind. Hit subscribe now and fuel your own fire with us.
The morning I woke up on the floor of my own bathroom, the first thing I heard was my phone buzzing. I reached for it with my left hand because my right shoulder felt like someone had driven a nail through it. The screen said, "Mom." I answered, "Honey, I need you to transfer $300 before noon. Your sister's car registration is overdue, and you know how she gets." I was lying on cold tile. I had been there for what I later found out was 11 minutes. "Mom, I think I fell." "What do you mean you fell? Did you slip?" "I don't know. I was brushing my teeth, and then I was on the floor. My shoulder, well, can you get up? Because I really need you to handle this before the DMV closes. Your sister has been crying since yesterday." I got up. I always got up. "My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. I'm a senior project manager at a logistics firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. I make good money. I own my condo, and for the better part of 6 years, I paid for things I will never be able to explain to a normal person without watching their face change. My parents live 40 minutes away in the house I grew up in. My sister Danielle is 27 and has lived with them her entire life. Danielle doesn't work, not in any consistent way. She does nails sometimes. She sells things online sometimes. She is, according to my mother, still figuring things out, which is something my mother has been saying about her for a decade. My husband, Marcus, is a high school history teacher. He is the most patient man I have ever met. And even he had a limit. I just didn't know where it was yet. That morning, the morning I fell, I drove myself to urgent care because I assumed it was nothing. A pinched nerve. Stress. I had been working 60-hour weeks on a warehouse expansion project and sleeping maybe 5 hours a night. The doctor at urgent care looked at the way my right arm was hanging and sent me to the ER immediately. He didn't let me drive. He had a nurse sit with me until a cab arrived. The ER did imaging. Then they did more imaging. Then a doctor I had never met sat down across from me in a curtained bay and said the words thoracic outlet syndrome with vascular compromise and told me I needed surgery. Not next week. That day. I called Marcus. He was in second period. He answered on the third ring, stepped into the hallway, and by the time I finished explaining what the doctor had said, he was already telling his department head he needed to leave. "I'm coming right now," he said. "Don't sign anything until I get there. Not because you need my permission, you don't, but because I want to be there, okay? I'm coming." He was there in 22 minutes. I also called my mother. I told her I was at Mercy General, that I had fallen that morning because of a vascular issue in my shoulder, and that I needed surgery the same day. There was a pause. "Today? Claire, it's Wednesday. I know what day it is. Your father has his back appointment at 2, and I promised Danielle I'd take her to pick up those shelving units she bought. She's been waiting on those for 3 weeks. I sat in that hospital bed and looked at the IV line in my arm and said, "Mom, I need surgery today." Another pause. "Is it life-threatening?" The doctor had not used those exact words. He had said serious and time-sensitive, and we don't want to wait on this. I told her that. "So it's not life-threatening." "Mom, baby, I'm not saying we don't care. I'm saying, if it's not an emergency, then we can come after the appointments. We'll be there by 4:30, 5 at the latest. Okay? Love you." She hung up. Marcus arrived at 12:47 p.m. He held my hand during the pre-op consultation. He asked the surgeon questions I hadn't thought to ask. He signed the form confirming he was my emergency contact because he had been my emergency contact for 4 years. Because I had updated that information the week after we got married, because that is what you do when you are an adult woman with a husband. My parents arrived at 5:20 p.m. I was already out of surgery. I was in recovery, groggy, with my arm in a sling, and a drainage tube I didn't want to think about. Marcus was sitting beside me reading something on his phone. When my mother walked in, she looked at the room like she was assessing it. And then she looked at Marcus. And then she looked at me, and she said, "Oh good. You look fine. See, I told you it wasn't an emergency. My father asked if the hospital had a decent cafeteria. Let me tell you about the money, because the money is important, and I want you to understand it fully before we get to what happened later. It started small. When I got my first real job at 24, my mother called to congratulate me, and then, in the same phone call, mentioned that the water heater had gone out and it was $600 to replace it, and they were a little short. I sent $600. It felt good. I was doing well and they weren't, and that's what family is for. By the time I was 27, I was sending $800 a month, not for any emergency. Just a standing transfer, first of the month, because my mother had said at some point that it was easier that way, and I had agreed. Somewhere in there, I also started paying Danielle's phone bill, which was $94 a month, because she was going through something, and my mother didn't want her to feel isolated. When I was 28, Danielle wanted to take an online aesthetics course so she could do lashes professionally and build something for herself. The course was $2,200. My mother texted me the enrollment link. I paid it. Danielle completed about a third of the course and then said it wasn't for her. When I was 29, my parents' furnace died in January. That was $3,800. I put it on a credit card and paid it off over 6 months. My parents thanked me twice, and then, in February, my mother called to tell me Danielle was having a hard time, and could I send an extra $400 that month just to help her get on her feet. Marcus knew about the monthly transfers. We had talked about it. He thought it was too much, but he understood my position, which was that I had more than they did, and I didn't want my parents to struggle. What he didn't know, for a long time, was the full number. One night in October, about 2 months before I ended up on the floor of my bathroom, he sat down at the kitchen table with a piece of paper. He had been going through our finances to refinance the condo. He had added up what I had sent to my family in the past 3 years. The number was $47,000. He put the paper on the table, and he looked at me for a long time without saying anything. Then he said, "Claire, that's almost $50,000. I know. We could have paid off your car. I know. Does your family know that number?" I hadn't thought of it that way. Not as a number. It had always felt like individual decisions, individual moments of need, individual phone calls where my mother sounded tired and I wanted to help. "No," I said. "Probably not." "Do you know why they never ask you how you're doing before they ask you for something?" I didn't answer that. I didn't have an answer. The surgery recovery took 3 weeks before I could return to work. During those 3 weeks, my mother called me 7 times. 4 of those calls were about money. One was about Danielle, who had gotten into a minor dispute with a neighbor and needed advice. One was to tell me about a show she was watching. One was to ask if I was back to normal yet, because she needed me to be the emergency contact for my father's upcoming knee procedure, and she wanted to make sure I was capable. Marcus watched all of this. He didn't say much, but I saw him. The turning point wasn't dramatic, not at first. It was a Tuesday afternoon about 6 weeks after my surgery. I was back at work, still in physical therapy twice a week, still tired in a way that felt cellular. My mother called at 2 p.m. "Honey, I need you to do something for me." I was in the middle of a project review. "Mom, I'm at work. This will just take a second. Danielle found this apartment she wants to move into. It's $1,150 a month. And we were thinking, since you've been helping us anyway, if you could just take over her portion, that's $575 a month from us, and $575 from you, and she'd be completely on her own. Mum, it would be so good for her, Claire. She really wants her independence." I want you to picture this moment clearly. I am sitting at my desk. My right shoulder still aches when I lift my arm above a certain angle. I had surgery 8 weeks ago that I called my mother about, and she arrived 4 hours later because she had errands. And she is now asking me to subsidize my 27-year-old sister's apartment so that Danielle can have her independence. I said, "I have to call you back." I did not call her back. That night I sat with Marcus at the kitchen table, and I told him everything. Not just the recent call. Everything. The $47,000. The feeling I had carried since I was a teenager, that Danielle was the one who got my parents' full attention, and I was the one who got their needs. The time I graduated college magna cum laude, and my mother left the ceremony early because Danielle had a headache. The time I got promoted and called to celebrate, and my mother spent most of the call talking about how hard Danielle was taking a recent breakup. The time I was in the hospital with a vascular injury, and my mother said, "Is it life-threatening?" before she said, "Are you scared?" Marcus listened to all of it. Then he said, "What do you want to do?" "I want to stop," I said. "Okay," he said. "Then we stop." "They're going to be upset." "I know. My mother's going to say I'm abandoning the family." "Probably. And Danielle is going to..." "Claire." He reached across the table and put his hand over mine. "What do you want to do?" "I want to stop," I said again. And this time it felt like something I actually meant. I did not call my mother and announce it. I didn't write a letter. I transferred the first of the month, and then I didn't transfer the second month. When my mother texted asking if everything was okay with the transfer, I texted back, "Hi, Mom. I've been thinking a lot about my finances since the surgery, and I need to stop the monthly transfers for now. I love you." She called 4 times that day. I answered the 4th. The conversation lasted 45 minutes. She cried. She said I was being selfish. She said I had never thought about anyone but myself. She said Danielle was going to be devastated. She said my father's feelings were hurt even though I noticed she was the only one speaking. She said, "And this is exact, after everything we've done for you." I said, "Mom, I need you to hear me. I had surgery 2 months ago. I was alone in the ER for almost 2 hours before Marcus got there. I called you, and you had other things to do. I'm not saying that to be cruel. I'm saying it because I need you to understand that I am not in a position to keep taking care of everyone else's needs when mine don't seem to matter." Silence. Then, "That is so unfair, Claire. We came. We were there. You were there at 5:20 in the afternoon for a surgery that started at 1. More silence. "I think we should take a break from talking for a little while," I said. "I think I need some time." She hung up before I did. Here is where I have to tell you about my company's annual recognition dinner, because that is where everything landed. I work for a regional logistics company called Hartwell Distribution. Every year in March, we hold a dinner for employees, clients, and stakeholders. Awards are given. Speeches are made. It is a genuinely nice event at a hotel ballroom downtown. 3 weeks before the dinner, my manager told me I was receiving the Leadership Excellence Award for the warehouse expansion project I had managed over the past year. It was the project I had been working on during the months I fell in my bathroom, during the surgery, during the recovery. It was a project I had delivered on time, and 4% under budget, with a team of 22 people, while my body was failing me, and my family was asking me for money. My parents had always asked to come to my company events. I had always brought them. It was a way to show them my life, my work, the world I had built. And because I had not spoken to my mother in 6 weeks, and had not spoken to my father directly in longer than that, I did not invite them this year. But my mother found out. My cousin Michelle mentioned it on a family group chat, congratulating me, and my mother saw it. She called me the next day. "I heard you're getting an award." "Yes. And you didn't invite us." "No." A long pause. Then her voice shifted into something quieter, something designed to make me feel guilty. "Claire, we're your parents. We want to celebrate you." Something moved in me. I don't know what to call it exactly, not anger. Something cooler than anger. I said, "You can come." Because I had made a decision, Marcus knew about the decision. He thought it was the right one. He also made me promise that I would not change my mind the morning of, and that I would eat something before we left the house. The dinner was on a Saturday. I wore a navy dress and my hair up. Marcus wore a dark gray suit, and he looked so good I almost got distracted from the whole plan. We sat at our company table with my manager and a few colleagues and their partners. My parents sat 2 tables away with my aunt and uncle, who had also been invited by my cousin. Danielle was there too, in a dress I recognized, one my mother had bought her the same month I had paid for the water heater. The awards came after the main course. My name was called third. I walked to the front of the room, shook my manager's hand, took the award, and stood at the microphone. I had prepared remarks, professional ones. 2 minutes of gratitude and reflection on the project and the team. I delivered all of them. And then I paused, and I said, I also want to say something a little more personal, if that's all right. No one said it wasn't. I managed this project through a period that was harder than most people here knew about, I said. I had a surgical procedure in November that required me to take 3 weeks away. Before the surgery, I had a health scare that started at home, alone, and I called the people I expected to be there. My husband was in a classroom 20 minutes away, and he left immediately. Other people I called had other things to do. I paused. I'm not saying this to embarrass anyone. I'm saying it because this award is for work I did while navigating something real. And the person who made it possible for me to navigate it was the man sitting at table 7, who drove 22 minutes and held my hand in pre-op, and didn't make me explain why it mattered that he was there. So, Marcus, this one's for you. There was applause. There were some tears at my table. Marcus pressed his hand flat against his chest and looked at me like I had handed him something he didn't know how to hold. I walked back to my seat. I did not look at table 9 until I sat down. When I did look, my mother was staring at me. My father was looking at the table. Danielle was on her phone. Dinner continued. At some point during dessert, I felt a hand on my shoulder, and I turned to find my mother standing behind me. She leaned down. Can we talk? She said quietly. Outside? Sure, I said. Marcus gave me a look that asked a question. I touched his arm and shook my head slightly, meaning, I've got this. We stood in the hallway outside the ballroom, near a window that looked out onto the hotel parking lot. My mother's face was composed in a way that meant she was working very hard to keep it that way. That was humiliating, she said. I didn't use your name. People knew. Your aunt knew. Everyone at that table knew. Mom, I said there were people who had other things to do. If that applies to you, that's between you and your conscience. You have never spoken to me like this. I've thought it for a long time. She was quiet for a moment. Then, in a voice that cost her something, we came to the hospital. I know we were late, but we came. I know you did. And the money, Claire. We needed that. We genuinely needed it. Your father's insurance doesn't cover. Mom. I kept my voice level. I am not ending this conversation because I want to punish you. I'm ending it because I've learned that my needs are not going to be prioritized in this family, and so I have to prioritize them myself. I love you. I do. But I cannot keep being the person who funds everyone else's life, while being told my emergencies are not emergencies. She flinched at that. She had said those words, and she knew it. What does this mean? She asked. Going forward, what does this mean? It means the transfers are done, I said. It means I need you to treat me like a daughter and not a resource. It means when something happens to me, I need it to matter to you, the same way Danielle's things matter to you. I don't know if that's possible. I hope it is. But I'm not willing to keep operating the way we have been. She didn't say anything for a long moment. And then, very quietly, she said, I didn't know it was that bad. I believed her, and I also didn't believe her. And I think both of those things can be true at the same time. I know, I said. We went back inside. Marcus was talking to my manager about something. He looked up when I came back, and I sat down and he reached under the table and took my hand. That was 4 months ago. My mother and I talk on the phone about once a week now. She doesn't ask about money. I don't know if that's because she's decided to respect my boundary or because she's decided to ask Danielle's boyfriend instead. I've heard he does reasonably well. I don't ask. My father texted me on my birthday, which he hadn't done in at least 3 years. It was a short text. It said, Happy birthday, Claire. Proud of you. I read it 5 times. Danielle moved into her apartment. I don't know how she's funding it. I stopped tracking that. The thing I wasn't expecting, the thing no one tells you, is how quiet it gets after you stop. Not quiet in a sad way. Quiet in the way a room gets when you finally turn off a sound you've been hearing for so long you forgot it was noise. I didn't realize how much mental space I had been occupying with calculations. How much do they need? Is this enough? What if I say no? What will they think of me? Until that space was just gone. Marcus asked me a few weeks after the dinner, lying in bed with the lights off. Do you feel guilty? I thought about it honestly. Sometimes, I said. In the morning mostly. And then it fades. That sounds about right, he said. I still have the award on my desk at work. It's a glass thing. Not particularly beautiful. With my name etched into it and the year and the project name, I look at it sometimes when I'm on a long call or waiting for something to load. I think about the version of me who managed that project in pain, who fell on her bathroom floor and then drove herself to urgent care, who called her mother from a hospital bed and heard the words, "Is it life-threatening?" I think about how that version of me still transferred the money on the first of the month. And I think about the version of me now who doesn't. I think she's going to be okay. I really do.